So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where the USA collapses in modern day 2023. So the USA, of course, is the most powerful country in the world, both economically and military wise, and also probably has the most influence out of any other country in the world, with allies all over the globe, including Europe, South America, Africa, Oceania, and even East Asia, with countries like Japan and South Korea. But what if the USA was to simply just collapse? It's not improbable because of internal conflicts. You know, we have two very divided political parties that look like they just aren't having fun with each other, and that is the case. So what if this all kind of fizzled into a civil war, which I'm not going to be covering because I've already done a USA civil war. Go check out that video. Just search it and then search AdizzPro. That's how you're gonna find it. Or you can like scroll aimlessly on my channel and see all my other videos, which you should go watch. Anyway, I'm plugging myself for my own video. That doesn't even, okay. But yeah, so it could fizzle into a civil war, which would maybe even cause a collapse of the country. And if the USA were to simply collapse, that is going to hurt the world a lot. So if you guys do enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content. That's right, more content, not just mapping, just content in general. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into the scenario. So the USA here is going to be collapsing, and since this is an AdizzPro video, let's just go ahead and that's the wrong color. Let's go ahead and sink it right into the ocean. All right, so now the USA has been properly sank into the ocean, English, whatever that is. And the world is going to react to this in many different ways. The Western countries are going to be pondering. The Eastern countries are going to be celebrating, but probably not for long, because no matter what country you are, this is going to hurt because the USA has such a large grasp on the world economy. And yeah, so with them gone, the world economy is gone, ditched. China is the #1 world economic factor now. I'm assuming there's going to be obviously there's going to be a currency change because yeah, the US dollar is no more. But as the world shifts over to China and maybe even the EU, first it's going to go into an economical depression, which will probably be the worst depression in history of world economics. And then people are going to go crazy, and that's going to lead to wars. So maybe not like war right away. Like obviously people are going to be hungry. When people get hungry, they get angry. And then that goes through the entire population. The population, of course, makes up the government. And the government, when they get angry, they kill people, and a lot of them. But let's start with Russia. I think it makes the most sense to go off of the US's enemies here as opposed to their allies, because the allies would probably not react too much, whereas the enemies, they definitely would. Because, you know, the #1 threat that's stopping them from expanding is no longer there. So we all know about Russia's war in Ukraine. It's been going on for over a year now, and they haven't really done much. But with the United States gone, Ukraine is going to lose its #1 contributor. It's also probably going to lose the EU and NATO support. Now, this would most likely be because these countries want to defend themselves now. The USA is no longer there to protect them. They have to build their own defense. They have to rebudget, and they have to account for themselves more so now. So they're going to stop supporting Ukraine here, and that's going to really demoralize the country, and they're going to lose a lot of equipment. And when you lose a lot of equipment, you tend to lose wars. Now, Russia has, of course, already lost a majority of their equipment to just Ukraine alone. But since the USA is no longer supplying Ukraine, we're going to assume that they're going to default on equipment. They might be able to steal some equipment from Russia like they have been doing. But then again, you know, Russia, if we're looking at the war economies, Russia's going to be able to rebuild a lot faster than Ukraine. Anyway, I'm just justifying the fact that Ukraine's going to get smacked around here and eventually lose this war all the way out. In the peace deal here, we have one big union taking place between Russia and Belarus, and these two countries now joined together into one. We'll go ahead and take all of Ukraine. And there's no really barrier preventing Russia from doing this. There's no leverage by the West anymore, because if they were to fight Russia right now, honestly, if they were to fight them, they'd probably stalemate them. But in the future, when Russia's rebuilt a little bit and gotten its military and population back on its side, it would probably roll through Europe pretty easily. Maybe not easily, but it would be able to get pretty far. Let's just put it like that. And speaking of countries who are no longer protected by certain countries, Georgia, which we all know has been oppressed by Russia since 2008, is, well, they're going to get annexed. There's no point in drawing this out into a war because they wouldn't win it. There's no point in showing it. It's just a quick little thing. You could argue it's the same thing with Ukraine, but then again, Ukraine's a much larger country. And if I were to simply just erase its borders, there would be a lot of people that are mad. Georgians, people from Georgia, I apologize. All right, so Russia is now expanding its influence and borders across the world, most notably into Europe, but also now into Central-ish Asia. That's not Central Asia. This is the Caucasus region. If you're dyslexic like me, You might call it something else. But yeah, Russia's influence is expanding as well as their political grasp, which is the same thing as influence. I don't know what I'm saying right now, but they are getting bigger, which is not good for the West. Maybe it's good for other countries like these guys, but they're probably gonna get annexed too, so maybe not. Anyway, let's go ahead and hop over to China. Now, China is they're gonna go ahead and do some stuff in Taiwan. They're gonna take Taiwan. Now, Taiwan is a fairly strong island. When you look at it, at this map right here, you know, of course, we have China, and then we have Taiwan. Who's going to win the war? Obviously China, but Taiwan was backed severely by the US. They filled them with equipment. Same thing with Japan. They also filled Taiwan with equipment and supplies for defense. Without the US, Taiwan is going to lose not only a lot of that equipment, well, one of their largest exports. We all know, I think a majority of us know why the US wants to protect Taiwan, but there's a lot of things in Taiwan that they give to us that we don't want China to have, because if China gets it, they'll raise the price and then they'll ship it to us. And tariffs, they're not fun. So that's kind of why we want to defend Taiwan even more so than Ukraine. But without the US, of course, that doesn't even matter. China would be able to take Taiwan, I want to say fairly easily, but they'd put up a pretty good defense. But eventually, at the end of it, China would definitely win. Now let's talk about India for a second. Now, India is an interesting one because they are allied with both the US and Russia. If you were to go to India and survey the entire country, all 1.4 billion people, good luck. But 50% would say they like Russia, 50% would say they like the USA. Yeah, that was as of 2022. I don't think much has changed since then, so I'm pretty sure it's still like that. Maybe a little bit more towards the US because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But then again, like I said, it's pretty split. Without the USA in the world, though, India now only has Russia, and that may or may not make them 100% for Russia. We might see a growing people who are in favor of China, and that's due to their economical superiority in the world, of course, but also just because it's right there. But there's one important thing to note about this, and that is that China and India are not friendly with each other. Now, I don't want to say they're hostile because technically they aren't. They're both in an alliance together known as BRICS, which is an economical alliance between China, India, Russia, South Africa, and Brazil. And of course, being in an alliance / pact together is going to require some form of formality. And since they aren't at each other's necks right now, that's going to work out for them. So India and China, they don't like each other. But then again, they are willing to put aside their differences to work together. In this particular scenario, without the USA pushing India to be more pro-Western, we could see India fully go over towards the East, meaning Russia and China. Or alternatively, we could see India go away from the East and more towards the EU. But for the sake of this video and for the sake of not making people hate me, India no longer exists. It is dead to me in this scenario. I would sink it, but we already sank the USA. The world does not need any more hurt. Now let's jump over to the Middle East. Oh boy. Israel is screwed. Now, Israel on its own is a fairly strong country, but if we look at who gives them all these supplies, it's it's a country that's at the bottom of the ocean right now. Majority of the world, I think like 60% recognizes Palestine. Everyone, well, I don't want to say everyone, but a majority of the world also recognizes Israel. So a majority of the world has this coexistence policy, and the USA actually is probably the main reason why Palestine isn't technically a country considered by the UN. It is an observer state, which honestly that's good enough for me to be a country. But the USA leverages a lot of Western countries to not recognize Palestine in order to keep friendly relations with Israel and keep pumping weapons and stuff into their system in order to gain a lot of money. That's just kind of how the USA works. They like giving out weapons, just like what they're doing in Ukraine, and in exchange for that they get money. The USA is a war-based economy. If we look at World War I, we look at World War II. World War I took place in the 1910s. In the 1920s, we saw great economic prosperity before, of course, the Great Depression. That was due to a lot of different factors, but also consumerism is a big factor. But I'm not going to jump into that because economics is interesting. But also after World War II, which started in 1939, ended in 1940s and 1950s, greatest economic prosperity in U.S. history, I believe, up until that point. So war does good things for the U.S. economy when it's all said and done. But the USA doesn't exist anymore, so that doesn't even matter. And Israel is going to lose a lot of its weapons, and a lot of the countries beside it, like Palestine and Iran and Iraq and Syria, are going to start to kind of gang up on Israel. And eventually we have a large coalition between a lot of countries forming in order to get rid of Israel and restore Palestine. Fully, that is, because technically Palestine is there. Yeah, I don't really want to touch too much on this region because it's just a mess. But Israel seizes Palestine almost right away, and from here they're going to go ahead and start arguing with all these countries saying, hey, hey, stop it before we do bad things. So they start to invade out into the Sinai Peninsula, up into Lebanon and Syria, but eventually this is crushed. Egypt's troops push back the Israelis, Iran and Iraq push back the Israelis. Palestine reliberates itself, and from here, it's goodbye Israel. Once again, it's important to keep in mind that the EU and NATO would not supply Israel in this scenario. Similarly to how they didn't supply Ukraine, they want to defend themselves now as opposed to defending other countries across the world. Israel is most likely not a priority for them, which means that Israel was on its own, and against all these guys, they most likely wouldn't be able to win. In this peace treaty here, we see that Palestine is fully restored, if you want to call it restored. It's fully annexes all of Israel, and now we have actually a lot of the population of Israel leaving to go to Europe. This would probably be their best move, because I don't think it would be too much of a friendly environment, because the Middle East tends to not be friendly in general, and especially after all the wars and horrible things that's happened right here, you might just want to leave. Anyway, moving away from this area, let's go back to Europe. Now Europe here, they're strong. They're one of the strongest forces in the world. Of course, the EU and NATO would most likely combine into just a federation union here, and that's exactly where I'm going to go to next. We have the European countries here uniting into one large bloc, or one large country. It starts off with France and Germany, who unite into the European Federation. We then see Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands follow suit. Poland soon joins this, as well as Austria and Czechia. Denmark is in on it. And then up north, interestingly, we have something a little bit different happening. We have a union between all of the Nordic countries combining into the Nordic Union. This, of course, is going to go ahead and include Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Now, Denmark didn't join this, and that's because they joined the EU, obviously. And sorry if I'm talking like slow and deep. It's because I just had one of those after school naps where you kind of go to bed on accident too early. It's currently 11 o'clock at night for me, so yeah, I fell asleep at like 5 o'clock and woke up at 9. And now I'm probably not gonna be able to sleep tonight, so that's cool. But also, I got the morning effect going on with the deep voice and the tiredness. After school naps, they hit different, but also they kind of screw you up a little bit. Anyway, mapping and stuff. The European Federation has been formed. Now there are some countries that want to get in, but just haven't crossed all the political barriers yet. Those countries include Spain and Italy. Spain has a little bit of a problem with Catalonia. Catalonia kind of wants to join in on its own. Spain says nuh-uh, and that's going to create kind of an issue here. The UK, of course, is always going to be split. They're kind of trying to do Brexit right now, even though they're not even a part of the Federation. Italy, mafia issues, and then Romania, they kind of want to get in, but they're detached, so they really can't right now. But yeah, unionization is starting to take place in different places across the world, most notably Europe. But we also see something similar happening over here in the Middle East between Iraq, Iran, and Syria. Now, I know Iraq and Iran don't actually hold the best of relations. I found this out a while ago, but we're gonna go ahead and assume that Iran is gonna go ahead and gain its own kind of influence. I'm sure that Russia would also have something to do with this, but Iraq's leaders are toppled and its government is switched over to a more Eastern friendly kind of government, which then goes ahead and unites with Iraq, or actually Iran and Syria. And a pretty big division is now going on in the Middle East here between Turkey, Saudi Arabia against Iran, Palestine, and Yemen. Obviously not too friendly. These countries have never been too friendly, but the US is no longer here to kind of, I guess, like police them around to not fighting each other. Russia, if anything, is probably going to encourage a war because Saudi Arabia, they have oil. Russia wants oil. So if Iran controls that, they can get it cheaper and easier. But then again, Saudi Arabia is kind of been a little bit nice to Russia lately in real life. So who knows? So now we jump back over to China here. And honestly, I have faith in China to not do anything too crazy. I think the biggest thing they would do is take over Taiwan, and then from here just kind of bully around everyone else. But I don't see China as an aggressive expansion country like Russia is, and that's just due to them being the #1 economic factor in the world. They don't want to piss any countries off, most notably the European Federation, who is going to be probably the second largest trading entity in the world. Of course, these two are going to trade with each other. They're not going to do it by that, because that's impossible. If they're going to trade it with each other, they're going to do it like this. So yeah, or maybe you go through the American Sea and just jump straight across. But yeah, China's going to hold kind of a isolationist policy, but at the same time they're going to bully countries. So like in the South China Sea, or what do you want to call it, the West Philippine Sea, they're probably going to try to take control of some of these islands that aren't theirs, like I don't know, just scatter around islands. They might even try to claim this as an island. China just does things like that, but they're most definitely going to go after some of these Pacific islands out here in order just to kind of expand their influence. And with great influence comes power, as we saw with the United States. So let's go ahead and recap a little bit. Of course, there's going to be a lot more that happens. This is just a time period that I've covered, and there's going to be a little bit more after I get done with this. But first off, we have the United States disappearing and causing an economical depression in the world, one of the largest in history, if not the largest. Then we have Russia kind of using this to their advantage and expanding into Europe and the Caucasus region. China takes Taiwan. The Middle East gets rid of Israel and then does some uniting. And Europe unites into a federation. Actually, there's two federations, the Nordic Union and the European Federation. From here in the coming years, we have more unionization happening and not a lot of war happening because the world is still in an economical depression, in which is not serving them too well. And actually, this does kind of have me thinking, because in this scenario, would unifying with your neighbors help your economy, or would it hurt it more because of the process of creating one currency? Now, technically, these guys do share a currency together, which is the euro. I think Poland uses something different. If I'm wrong, correct me. But France and Germany, they use the euro. That's the two largest countries already there. And then, of course, you have the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. They use the euro. Pretty sure Denmark does. Austria, I'm pretty sure does. Not sure about Poland. I don't think they do, though. And Czechia, they use their own thing. So there's a little bit of currency conversion to happen there, but that shouldn't be too hard. Of course, part of joining the EU is converting your currency, but you don't necessarily have to do it, but the option is there for you too. And then I'm pretty sure the Nordic Union is going to majority use the euro. Actually, I take that back. None of these countries use the euro. So they have to figure their own thing out, most likely switching to the euro and then eventually uniting with the European Federation, which is going to lead me to the next part of this video, where these two federations unite into one, creating a large entity over here in Europe. The Baltic states, much to Russia's dismay, are going to go ahead and join the European Federation. We have a large portion of countries starting to follow suit, including Slovakia, Slovenia, and Croatia. We could possibly see Spain erupt into a civil war or rebellion, but we're going to ignore that for now and just have them join finally. We have Ireland joining before the UK joins. And finally, the most notable country that remains is Italy, and they finally join. The Balkans are the Balkans, and they're always going to be that way, so they don't necessarily join right away. That's because of political barriers, but we do have Moldova being eaten up by Russia in this time frame, which is going to go ahead and speed up the process for a lot of these countries. Now, speaking of Russia, they're going to go ahead and do some things like annexing all of Kazakhstan, you know, just the usual, annexing one of the largest countries in the world. They're also going to go after and get Uzbekistan, and they don't necessarily want to dig any deeper because they are starting to develop hostile relations with China. Notice how I said hostile. With India, I didn't say hostile because there was still some form of working together. Now, with China and Russia, with USA being gone, the two largest powers, of course, could never get along. In our modern timeline, which is right now, the USA and Russia aren't, or I guess maybe it's the USA and China. Now, me personally, I don't see Russia stronger than China. I see China stronger than Russia, and that's for a good reason. Of course, China economically is more powerful than Russia. Military-wise, they're almost there. They might even be there. We don't know, technically. Their navy is a little bit cheap, though, but at least they have a navy. Russia's navy is sad. But when we look at the modern day, it's USA and Russia, or USA and China. Technically, it's both, but it's not Russia and China together yet. It might be soon, though, so get ready for World War III. But yeah, what I'm trying to get at here is that the two strongest powers always seem to not get along. In this case, Russia and China are no longer getting along. We could see this develop into a war, in which case I think it could. I'm not saying that it 100% would happen, but the teams in that war would be very interesting, to say the least. Now, keep in mind, this is probably a couple decades down the line, but we have Russia versus China. Mongolia joins in on China's team. We have Iran joining in on Russia's team, as well as Israel. Saudi Arabia and Oman are going to join in on China's team, and Turkey on China's team as well. Of course, we have to fill in some of the smaller countries here, so it would probably go something like this. There's that. Pakistan would most likely get involved, which would lead India to get involved. Yeah, India is an interesting one here. I know I said I would ignore them earlier, but this is probably what they would end up doing. Eventually, we have Japan and South Korea getting involved and putting them on the red team against China. Very strange sides here, I know, but remember, again, the USA is gone, their influence is gone, and countries are going to start to do their own thing. So if you support the USA in real life right now, pick a side here because it's interesting. On one hand, you have your allies like Japan, the Philippines, South Korea, and India, but they also share a team with Russia and Iran. On the other hand, you have some allies like Turkey and Saudi Arabia, as well as Oman, the UAE, and Qatar, but they share a team with Pakistan. Or no, Pakistan, actually, we're friendly with Pakistan. We're chill with Pakistan. Forget I said that. But they share a team with China. And in this scenario, China's kind of gone more neutral, so maybe you would support China, maybe not. It's best you just, stay under the water, though, because we're all dead. No opinions, you're dead. The EU could be a factor. They might join the blue team, but I highly doubt that because they are still, of course, going to be friendly with Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and India. Those are relations that the USA technically kind of fostered a little bit, mostly with the Philippines though, because the USA controlled the Philippines, and of course they traded with the USA. USA controls Philippines, therefore Philippines is also always going to be involved, but then they got their independence and those trades lasted. Japan, that's more historical. Of course the USA did occupy it after World War II, and that of course did help their trade relations and economical prosperity. But then again, even before the USA showed up here in the whenever they did, originally it was like the 1800s, they were like showing up and demanding that they trade with them. The Europeans were trying to do the same thing, except only the Dutch were successful with it. But yeah, I'm done spewing. This is what happened when the USA collapses. Of course, this is not accurate. This is not what would happen. I think if the USA did collapse in real life, I think it would actually maybe bring about a more unified world because of the depression that would ensue. I think the world would actually start uniting like I did depicted here, because the USA creates a lot of division, more so than people realize. A lot of problems in the world could be solved if the USA just didn't exist, but then again, a lot more problems would be created if the USA didn't exist. So this video is more of, you take the USA how you take it. If you love it, you love it. If you hate it, you hate it. If you live there and you don't want to live there, then you're not alone. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to this channel if you're new. Once again, all the support is greatly appreciated. I don't really know how to get people who aren't subscribed to subscribe. The ratio of people who aren't subscribed and keep coming back and don't subscribe is really like bad. Like there's a lot of people who continuously watch these videos that aren't subscribed, and that hurts the channel a little bit. So click subscribe. We're aiming for, I don't even know, do we have goals anymore? Is there even a point of having goals? We already have 100k, so I guess we're just chilling. But subscriber count has been horrendous since we hit 100k. We used to do like 6,000 subscribers a month. I think we're doing like 2,000 now, so ouchies. I know the content hasn't been as good lately, and that's just because I've been stressed out with school and trying to finish it out. It's almost over. I got like 3 weeks left. Beginning of June I'll be done, so thank God for that. I'm gonna try to be putting out 3 videos a week this summer. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be economically prosperous English. But once again, thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And of course, thank you to all the super fans. This includes Patrick Clauser, Yo Moma Moma, Texan Cowboy Cheese, Kylie Speaks Plays, Poland Country Ball, Dimitri, DW Cool Dude, Nevada Garbage Trucks, Yakko, Soviet Ball, and Serminator. Once again, thank you guys.